Hi, I'm Hassan Al and this is my management plan for the Indonesian Rusa Deer in the Royal National Park. The Rusa Deer are a medium to large sized deer which is native to Indonesia. The mature stags stand at about 100 centimeters high and weigh between 100 to 160 kilograms, and the females are about 90 centimeters high, weighing less than 80 kilograms. They live from 10 to 14 years and generally have about 4 calves in their lifetime. The main food sources are grass, leaves, and fruit. They don't need to drink any water since all their fluids are derived from the food they eat. Their main natural predators are the Javan leopard, the dhole, crocodiles, pythons, and the Komodo dragon. The Indonesian Rusa Deer was originally introduced to the Royal National Park in 1906 by the previous park trustees for an exhibition. They were acquired from a shipment of deer bound for New Zealand from New Caledonia. 7 Rusa Deer were released into a fenced peninsula called Deer Park. The deer soon escaped from their enclosure and began to multiply and spread through the park and adjacent areas. Between 1999 and 2002, an annual population estimates were made by conducting scat counts. This method is internationally recognized as one of the most accurate methods for surveying populations of large animals, particularly elusive cryptic species such as deer. Population estimates throughout the surveys ranged from 2,522 deer in 1999 to 2,877 in 2001. The density of the deer was highest in areas which were largely cleared. Grassy areas were present, and numbers did not change significantly in each area over three survey years. The observed exponential rate of increase for the population over the 3-year period of 1991-2001 was estimated to be about 10%. These results indicate the population is relatively stable and likely to be at or close to carrying capacity. In the 1999-2000 population was estimated to increase by 9.6%, and in the year 2000 to 2001, the population was estimated to increase by 4.16%. It's also predicted that in the absence of predation or other population controls, the population of Rusa Deer would increase approximately 10% per annum. National Parks and Wildlife Services have attempted to cull and remove the deer from the park. However, previous attempts to shoot the deer within the park raised animal welfare concerns in some sections of the community, while attempts to trap the deer in enclosures for relocation were of limited success due to the trap wariness of the deer and the lack of suitable farms to accept the animals. Major problems of deers in the Royal National Park for the natural impacts on the natural environment. There's evidence that indicates that deer can impact significantly on the vegetation communities through browsing and trampling, native fauna through competition for resources and habitat degradation, and also water quality of creeks and river systems through erosion and fecal contamination. Deer in and around the park also have socioeconomic impacts on surrounding communities through damage of residential gardens and fences, traffic hazards and motor vehicle accidents, attracting illegal hunters, carrying diseases and parasites which could be transmitted to humans, and impacting on agriculture. In January 2005, they were listed as a key threatening species under the Threatened Species Conservation Act, and they were put on that list due to the New South Wales Scientific Committee considered that deer pose a significant risk to a range of threatened species, populations, and ecological communities. In the case of the Royal National Park, there are a number of endangered ecological communities which are known to be subject to impacts, including the littoral forests, rainforests, and the Sydney freshwater wetlands. In a study in 2004, Keith and Pelot demonstrated that deer have major impacts on endangered Sydney freshwater wetland communities in the Royal National Park. As an example of the impacts that the deer are having on the wetlands, 75% of the stems and foliage of the threatened plant species Syzygium paniculatum was removed by deer. The paniculatum is a rare plant species which is only found in littoral rainforests. Between 1999 and 2002, the University of Western Sydney undertook a study on the ecology and environmental impact of Rusa Deer in the Royal National Park. They found that the environmental impact of the Rusa Deer was determined by monitoring the biodiversity of plant species in fenced and controlled plots at high and low density deer density sites over a 3-year period. The results of the exclosures showed no differences between the biodiversity of plant species in fenced plots compared to controlled plots, although large differences existed between plots located in high density deer locations compared to low density deer locations for habitats of littoral forests, which had 54% less understory in areas of high deer density, sandstone gully forests, which had 33% less understory, and sandstone heath, which had 27% less understory. Analysis of the deer diet also showed that they consumed a total of 18 native plant genera and 155 native plant species, including 2 endangered species and 9 vulnerable species and 13 regionally uncommon species. Seasonal variation of diet intake showed that many deer switched from introduced grasses to more native plant consumption in winter. It was also found through 4 dietary overlap studies between deer and wallabies that the overlap ranged from 24% in autumn in a heath habitat to 60% in winter in a cleared habitat. The modeling of the deer and wallaby density as a combined herbivore unit showed that one deer is equal to around 3.88 wallabies, and that herbivore density was 2 to 3 times greater than the density of other similar sized herbivores along the east coast of Australia. These studies demonstrate that the deer is definitely a big ecological problem in the Royal National Park. They have on their own caused a lot of loss of native plants, some of which are endangered and threatened species, and they are heavy competition for the they compete heavily with wallabies, sharing almost about 60% of their diet during winter times. The common management techniques for pest species include non-commercial hunting, trapping and relocating, baiting, fertility control, fencing, and ground shooting and aerial shooting. Non-commercial hunting is not isn't very useful in this situation, since hunting isn't allowed on National Parks and Wildlife Services managed lands in New South Wales. Trapping and relocating could be possible in some small locations to sort of fence off small areas where we know there are native species which we want to protect. However, it is expensive and time consuming to maintain all of the fences. Baiting baiting and fertility control also aren't really useful in this situation, since there are no effective baits or fertility controls for deer, which can be used in Australia currently. Fencing can be used to fence off certain areas where we know there's endangered plants or threatened plants. However, it's not very useful in situations of in public access, because in national parks, due to it could restrict public access and also affect native fauna movement. It's also fairly expensive and high maintenance. So as a long-term solution, not very useful, but it can be used to fence off small areas where we know there's endangered plants and protect those ones. Ground shooting would be a very useful method. It is recognized as a humane method for controlling large vertebrates. It doesn't impact non-target species, and also it allows for the targeting of specific herds which we know are a problem, as well as targeting of females to reduce population growth after the the shooting has been done. This could be done along with aerial shooting, which is known to be even more effective than ground shooting, since it's been used in many parts of Australia and New Zealand, and it's been seen to rapidly reduce feral animal populations. Used with ground shooting, it will significantly increase the culling rates, and it also allows shooters to get into areas where ground shooters can't normally get into, and also allows them to kill animals in generally a more humane way, so that they can ensure they get a good shot rather than just injuring the animal and the animal suffering until it dies. The aim of the plan is to manage deer populations to minimize negative impacts in the Royal National Park and to minimize other socio-economic impacts on the community. This will be achieved through reducing the number of deer in populations which impact negatively on the natural environment of the Royal National Park. And the primary long-term objective of the deer management program would be to reduce the number of Rusa deer in the Royal National Park to a total of fewer than 1,000 animals. Ground shooting would be the most appropriate technique, as it's the most useful and the least expensive and least time-consuming. However, it does have its limitations, being the access to sensitive areas. You can't really take a gun into an area that's culturally sensitive. Herds will start avoiding the areas that are being hunted with time, and you'll slowly get diminishing return on efforts. Therefore, it could be used with sedatives, aerial shooting, and even trapping to really get a good effect, and to pick up where ground shooting doesn't really work very well. Priority will be on areas where large herds congregate at night and where deer impact is the greatest, and the primary focus will be to protect threatened plant communities. Carcasses will be removed as soon as they can in order to limit the effect on the visitors of the area as well. That has been my management plan for the management of the Rusa Deer in the Royal National Park. Thank you very much.